Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would. Feel without. It is 6:11 a.m. on September 15th, 2021. Our producer was a little bit late today, but we are here anyway, always. Are you ready to suit up? Today on Warfare Wednesday, on your only no-nonsense podcast, brought to you through the Best Feeling Network and your only body, we'll be talking about what happens now that there is no God in life. What do we do? How did that happen? Does it matter? What is God? How do you feel? What? Are we just gonna leave you with some random words and just talk about these things for the sake of it? No. Are we gonna make you feel so good from the inside out using some guided meditation, some guided awareness, using nothing but our guided awareness? We don't even gotta do nothing. We can just sit here this morning, leave this podcast on, and feel so good from the inside out, stretching our self-awareness like a muscle. Let's talk about some subjects that sometimes and oftentimes feels difficult to talk about without a little bit of guided breathing. As in, let's place our self-awareness today. If you would please with me, let's place our self-awareness on an imaginary candle in your mind's eye or whatever, just floating in front of every person's lips, every human being's lips. In your mind's eye, place a candle that's just flickering in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out. Every human being has a candle floating in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out, including you, as you are also a human being, are you not? And so if you would humor me for just today and just for right now, and see for yourself, and don't take my word for it. If you would with me right now, and even just in your mind's eye, just pretend with me that humans always have a candle, an imaginary candle in their mind's eye in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. And along with that awareness, I want us to become aware of the fact that every human's tongue, the tip of the tongue, wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth while they're trying to not put that candle out. It's okay if the awareness rolls like that. Of course, it's not easy to make it all happen at the same time, but if you just stretch your self-awareness with me, we don't have to do anything. Just sit there wherever you are. Are you hanging out in the living room or are you walking around? Are you with the baby girl? Are you with the baby boy? Are you with the mommy? Are you with the nature? Are you in the dark or are you in the light? Wherever you are, I want to welcome you to the only no-nonsense podcast, brought to you through the Best Feeling Network. I want to welcome you to where we use our sense of the world to make sense of the world, where we will be achieving world peace through individual inner peace. Remember to let all of these words to go in one ear and out the other, as we are always paying attention to meaning, not object. And let's wake these worlds up physically, mentally, spiritually, and physically again. It is 6:15 a.m. on September 15, 2021. Let's stretch our self-awareness. We will be talking about no God. What that could mean, what we might do. Right after this short break. Please keep the front of your shins in your awareness. And as we are holding our controller in this simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath you take, let's hold our controller properly and become aware of all humans as beings with candles in front of their lips, and you know the rest. We will be right back. Looky there, there's the tongue. Have you noticed how crazy the world has been lately? Have you noticed the war that's going on in the world around lately today? It is Warfare Wednesday. How did we end up just talking about God and being a little bit okay with it as we're pretending there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that we're trying to not put out? And remembering that every human being wants their tip of the tongue to be anchored to the back of the bottom front's teeth. Again, as they are imagining with their mind's eye that there's always a candle in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. The tip of their tongue wanting to be anchored to the back of the bottom front of their teeth and yours, as we leave our swallowing muscles alone. Those swallowing muscles alone don't need to be engaged at any point in time consciously. Those swallowing muscles alone, as we are breaking down misconceptions that society has placed into us about us every day on Palgo on Welcome Back. To leaving your swallowing muscles alone, as you should never be engaging with those consciously. For the breathing pipe exists in front of the swallowing pipe. So to breathe well, as we always want to breathe well, as we are designed to, we want to leave those swallowing muscles alone consciously leave those alone as we move as though we think we are constructed. So we need to think about being constructed as leaving our swallowing muscles alone. And how does that feel for you? Do not just take my word for it. With a candle in front of every human being's lips, and as they leave their swallowing muscles alone, and you know where the tip of their tongue is anchored to, how are you feeling today? Let's stretch our self-awareness like a muscle today. Where are you? How are you? Are you just pacing the room again? Are you hanging out with some friends? What's up, friends? Are you feeling kind of exuberant today? Are you feeling jubilant, or are you feeling kind of down and out? Have things been going your way, or have they been kind of spiraling out of your control lately? Do you feel like the need to be outside has gotten stronger, or do you feel like you want to stay withdrawn indoors more? Do you feel at one point in time you had some kind of relationship with this idea of a God thing? And do you feel that that's changed over time? Do you feel that the perception towards a God thing has changed over your course of your lifetime? And in this body of yours, this window to this godlike experience of yours, do you feel that change in the perception of God thing, do you feel that it is a positive thing or a negative thing? As we are stretching our self-awareness like a muscle today, we will see around the world how crazy it is. We might be sitting here thinking, wow, this world is going crazy. And yet here we are, placing a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. It's just flickering there. You're not trying to inhale or exhale. I challenge you today to move from a visual awareness to an alignment awareness of the world. An alignment awareness mode of the world as opposed to a visual awareness of the world. And what does this mean, Herbie? As in, I challenge you to switch from your awareness of just your visuals, your eyes. When you look at human beings, I challenge you to switch from strictly a visual awareness of these human beings, but rather an alignment awareness of them by becoming aware of a candle flickering in front of every human being's mouth that they're trying to not put out. And of course, remembering that the tip of their tongue is anchored to the back of the bottom front of their teeth, and your teeth, or your tongue, and everybody's internal representation of themselves, this body map themselves that they've been developing since they were conceived. In this internal representation of themselves, I want you to place into your awareness today. I challenge you to place into your awareness today that in everybody's internal representation of themselves, in their mind's eye, their perception of their own body, challenge you today to become aware of people as individuals that in their internal representation have a candle floating in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. Their intention is to not put it out. As you're remembering and becoming aware of human beings as the tip of everybody's tongue wanting to be, say it with me, anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. As this candle is flickering in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out, the tip of everybody's tongues wants to, say it with me, They anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. The tip of every human being's tongue wants to be, say it with me, anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. As we are remembering to not allow this candle to be put out in front of everybody's lips. This God thing. This God thing. What happens if there's no God? Humans have been developing this idea of a God since before they've really developed anything. First starting off with many gods, right? Back in way times. A god of thunder, a god of grass, a god of life, a god of death, a god of war. Many gods. Humans have been developing the ideas of gods forever, so fiction as it might be, that must be fiction. These gods. 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 What we live in right now. On Warfare Wednesday, what we will notice today in the world. On Warfare Wednesday, in the world, we will notice right now a general consensus that there is no God. What does it look like when we live in a world with no God? Maybe more satisfyingly, right? Possibly, right? Why would we want no God? Well, don't we feel rejected by the idea of a God because we don't see evidence for one? Why would we want a God when we're moving towards a scientific life and it continuously becomes obvious that there's no God? There's no God. There's no God. And so we see right here is that whether or not there is a God, this floating creature in the sky, watching down on you, judging you, angry with you, right? As we're feeling the front of our shins, remember, and anchoring the tip of the tongue to the back of the bottom front's teeth. And remember that everybody has a candle that is in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out, including me, including you. And you're not thinking about inhaling or exhaling. But you might be asking, how am I? How's my body feeling? Does it feel like the tip of my tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth on its own? Or does it shift when I bring my awareness to the tip of my tongue as if it's just been caught being lazy? But how does it feel when we remember that the tip of our tongues and everybody's tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth? How does that feel? Humans have been inventing this idea of God, have been having a relationship with this idea of a God, whether or not there actually is a floating naked guy in the sky shooting down lightning from his fingertips. Whether or not that actually exists, humans have had a relationship with a God, this idea of a God, forever, right? Since the beginning of time. Humans naturally must gravitate towards a God because we cannot understand everything that happens at the same time. So we must align towards some kind of system, some kind of rule system to begin understanding and parsing all the information in our short lifetimes. We want to do something with that information. We want to understand it. Why do we want to understand it? Because in understanding that, don't we achieve freedom? Like understanding how to drive a car gives you freedom. Understanding how to work within the bounds of a system oftentimes gives you freedom. Learning to live within the bounds of how to ride a bike will offer you the freedom that the bike provides. Namely speed, distance, moving over terrain, all of the benefits that riding a bike provides you that must first come from a discipline of learning how to work within the bounds of that system. As in, you cannot ride a bike on the side of the wheels, you won't go anywhere. You have to learn how to balance on it. You have to learn how to play on the rules of the bike. Why would we want to establish a god? So that we can find out what rules of the game allow this bike that we're naturally playing as we wake up in this world. You weren't able to pick this world that you woke up into, but now you want to learn how to play it the best as you can. You want to learn how to ride this bike as best as you can. You want to learn how to drive this car, fly this plane if life was a plane. You want to be able to fly as best as possible. And how do you do that? By finding the correct instruction manual, right? And so throughout history, humans have constantly been trying to find the correct instruction manual, because we understand that we cannot manually watch every single thing and every single action and every single thought, every single idea that passes through our body. There's just too much going on. Our ideas and our thoughts and our emotions seem to fire off the same way that a restless leg syndrome would fire off. So if you can't control a leg twitch while you're sleeping, and if you can't control an eye twitch throughout the day, how can you think that you would control any of these thoughts, these emotions? Aren't those all just impulses as well? Next thing you know, we're talking about God, we're talking about human design, and you didn't realize that it was okay, as we were pretending that there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that we're trying to not put out. And remembering that the tip of every human being's tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom fronts of teeth. And we're leaving our swallowing muscles alone. Every human being is always leaving their swallowing muscles all the way alone. And as we switch our awareness from a visual awareness to an alignment awareness of the world, how does that feel for you? No God. No God in this world. This is the warfare that we see in this world, the craziness in this world that we see today, as a direct result of human beings coming to a consensus that there is no quote-unquote God. That there is no quote-unquote God. Why might this crazy world be a result of people feeling like there is no quote-unquote God? But when we're talking about God, are we talking about this naked guy in the sky? Are we talking about this crazy religion that was invented by human beings? Or are we talking about the concept of a God that human beings naturally gravitate towards? Whether or not there is one, are we talking about this God specifically that is defined by some human beings? We'll talk today about whether this God thing. We'll talk today about whether this existence of a God thing matters towards the relationship we have towards this God thing, and why the world today looks the way it does with all the craziness that we're going through today. Due to, as a consensus, human beings coming to a consensus that there is no quote-unquote God, and what we can do about that. As in, maybe we assumed too much about what we meant by this idea of a God, using our own human ideas, and then we felt all rejected. We all hurt our own feelings because we invented this idea of a God. It didn't really match up, but that was our idea of a God. We'll talk about that when we come back. Let's please put a candle in front of everybody's lips that we're trying to not put out. Remembering that the tip of everybody's tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth in this simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes, but that counter is reset with a breath. We invented this idea of a God being on this outside world, some kind of being from the space, from sky, and then felt all rejected when we didn't see it out there. But this God thing is just from behind us. It's just the you before you. This God thing is just the design of the human beings that you didn't choose, that you're just part of. This body of yours that you did not choose. That's just the God that we're talking about, not something floating up on the outside. But this God thing. This you before you, this design that you did not choose. We'll be right back. Is the world going to survive? Are you going to survive in this world? Is there craziness in this world? Who the hell talks about God so early in the morning? How the hell can't I talk about God on any other podcast? Well, does any other podcast feel so good from the inside out? Better than your morning would? Feel without, as we are tackling gigantic misconceptions in itty-bitty talking spaces today. Every day as we're stretching our self-awareness like a muscle. It is 6:39 a.m. on Wednesday, September 15th, 2021. I'm your host, Herbie. Good morning, everybody. And this is absolutely How Go On. How Go On. Gigantic concepts. Itty bitty living space, but feeling so good from the inside out. Not talking randomly, not talking just to talk, but talking to life love. To love life. To stop fearing death. Love all things always. Big love always. Remembering to allow all of these words to enter one ear, ooh, like a cartoon character. Allowing all these words to enter one ear, shoo, and out the other. As we are establishing meaning not just looking at the objects. We love you out there. Thank you so much for coming through. I appreciate you. And you know, we talk about these topics to achieve more freedom in life, to love life more deeply. Maybe I don't want to talk about this kind of stuff. Don't you? Haven't you been wanting to? I implore you to use the tools today. I challenge you to use the tools today. Let's talk about some rough topics. Oh, but we're not gonna make you feel so rough. What are you talking about? You came here to feel good, didn't you? So let's please, in your mind's eye, please imagine that there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out. Just in your awareness, you don't need to think about putting it out. You don't need to think about putting it on. You don't need to think about exhaling or inhaling. Just place into your awareness a candle in front of your lips, in front of every human being's lips. And you are also a human being, and there's a candle flickering that you're trying to not put out. And no matter wherever you are, whether you're in a car, whether you're talking to your friend, whether you're at a bar, I challenge you to remember that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front's teeth. You don't sit on your legs, and I implore you to observe your sense of self. Remember, you do not sit on your legs. I implore you to observe your sense of self, that is your body, that is the canvas, that is your knowable body that the world splashes onto. I challenge you to remember, I challenge you to place into your awareness that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front's teeth, and observe your sense of self. Leave those swallowing muscles alone, and how does that feel for you? As we shift our self-awareness, we don't gotta do nothing today. Just chill and sit back. Allow me the honor of being part of the symphony that is the world around you right now. As we're simply guiding and moving our self-awareness around. Like becoming aware of the fact that, hey, the back 1/3 of my tongue is vertical. Up and down, up and down, up and down. The back 1/3, that is the part of your tongue that is closer to your swallow pipe. The back 1/3 of my tongue is up and down, up and down. If you would say it with me, the back 1/3 of my tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down. Even if it's just in your head, please say it with me. The back of my tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down. Again, please, if you would, say it with me. The back of my tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down, up and down. And how does that feel for you? Today, as we're suiting up to feel so good in that body of ours on Warfare Wednesday, how does that feel for you? The back 1/3 of my tongue being vertical, as the tip of my tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. There is no God, guys. There is no thing out there in the sky that is watching down on you. There's no naked man in a toga shooting down lightning bolts at me, smiting me for touching my body in the secret to people who don't feature in movies anymore. There is no God out there. We're not talking about some God out in the sky, guys. We're not talking about some floating dude and bearded man in the sky. But what we're seeing in the world right now is a reaction to a lack of God, a lack of idea of a God. We're not talking about some guy, some floating man in the sky, some floated bearding man in the sky. We're not talking about that kind of God. What we're seeing in the world right now is happening due to a lack of God, because a lack of God is a lack of self. When you destroy the idea of a God, you erase the idea of a God, you erase the idea of the self. And what we're seeing right now is a degradation of society on Warfare Wednesday. We're seeing a degradation of society in the world due to a lack of God, a lack of self. What do you mean a lack of God is a lack of self, Herbie? Because God was never this thing out there in the sky. God was never this floating dude tippy-toeing on clouds in the sky. God was always something from within. God was always the self before the self before you. The design of you that comes before you. That is the God. That is the self. And that is the reason why the degradation of society is continuing today, why we are seeing it degrade today, is the lack of idea, the lack of belief in a God, the lack of belief in the self. The self is the God. The God is the design of you before you. As in, why do you feel dejected by this idea of not having a God? Why does it feel scary in the world now that it feels like God is dead? Now it feels that there is no God. Now it feels like there's consensus in the world that there's no God. Why does it spiral the way that it does? Because it was never about some ruling guy out there with a lightning bolt shooter. It was always about a sense of self. A design from within. Even wanting, even the idea of us reacting towards the idea of a God not existing. Where does that come from? From the design of a human being wanting the idea of a God, despite feeling rejected from the idea of there not being a God, or feeling abandoned from being able to feel this God. In the early creations of the West, the Constitution itself has the word God. Now, if we begin to believe that there is no God, if we feel rejected by the idea of a God, as in we cannot feel the effects or we cannot see the evidence of this God in real life, and of course we're going to reject the idea of a God. But what happens when you reject the idea of God, something that humans have been looking for and defining since the beginning of mankind, right? Of humankind, right? We've been establishing the idea of a God because we need something to align to since the beginning of time. And in today's society, when we are so smart, we don't see the evidence no more. We're going to say there's no God. But since God has been something and has been a real relationship that we've had with ourselves since the beginning of time, what happens is that we lose this relationship with ourselves. If we can't feel the idea of a God, then the entire West falls as the word God is in the freaking Constitution. It's right there in the founding building blocks of the ideas of the West. See, humans have been inventing this idea of God, humans have been describing their relationship with this idea of God since the beginning of time. And we are only just seeing the latest iteration, the latest and greatest of this iteration, which is going down to, from many gods to, one God. Why is that an improvement? Because our awareness can be easier placed on one thing. And so we can begin to learn how to orient towards this one thing, have less stress in our lives, feel more free in our lives. It's always been orienting from many gods to, one God. So here we are in the latest and greatest iteration of this. But of course, because the benefits of believing in one God as opposed to many gods so that we can align towards something daily have gotten so great that we are so smart now. So smart now that we do not see evidence for this God thing. However, it's due to our smartness being looked at the outside world, because this God thing happens to be the self before the self. No wonder we can't see it, as it is the self before the self. When you abandon the idea of God, which we might because we cannot feel this God thing, though it's everywhere, right? One nation under God. Well, we don't feel the evidence or can see the evidence for this God thing, so we're going to reject this idea of a God thing. But this idea of a God thing has been there since the beginning of our existence. It's not so much something that might exist out there, but it's something that has always and indefinitely will always exist in here, as it is the you before you, the you that defines your even need to search for a God, or your even need to feel a certain way about not having a God. Even that is defined by this design of you, which you did not create. And so when we destroy the idea of God, what we do is destroy the idea of the self, and no wonder the world is going the way it is. The self before the self. The you before the you. The you that happens before you. What are the consequences of us losing the sense of self? We'll be right back to talk about what happens when we lose the idea of God, the idea of the self. We'll be right back. They say God doesn't exist, but isn't God just the you before you? Isn't God just your design? Let me explain by that. What do you mean by that, Herbie? They say God doesn't exist, But isn't God just the you before you, the design of you before you? As in, you know, when you're sleeping and sometimes your leg twitches, or sometimes your arm spazzes out, or sometimes you blink when you're not noticing. You know, your body is always doing things that you're not noticing. That doesn't just stop on the physical level. That doesn't just stop at the outward expression of your leg twitching while you're sleeping, but rather there's impulses like this happening involuntarily all throughout your life. Ideas, thoughts, emotions, firing without your consent, in a sense, as your body is just designed to. Now where and what are those thoughts firing for? Those ideas firing for? All of them simultaneously firing, and then they outwardly express. On the tip of the iceberg, your body physically expresses outwardly a combination of all these different impulses happening in your body that you're not deciding on. Isn't your body always reacting to the world that is around and from within? No, God, but isn't this God this thing that is just the you before you, this design that is you? The design that we didn't choose, but defines everything that we think about, everything we feel, all the emotions that pass through us. As we're pretending that there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out. And remembering that the tip of our tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front's teeth always. Isn't this God thing just the you before you? The ability for your body to affect your entire awareness simply by shifting your self-awareness onto different aspects of your body, onto different concepts of your body. By simply shifting your awareness to proper truths about the body, or is your body not able to affect your entire experience? How is it able to do that? As we are pretending there's a candle in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out, it's just flickering there, and you're not thinking about inhaling or exhaling. As we are leaving our swallowing muscles alone and remembering the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical, up and down, as we are observing our sense of self. Is God not this thing about our body that we can affect our entire experience simply by shifting our awareness onto the proper ideas and truths? The fact that you can have a repeatable and measured approach towards achieving a neutrality, a sense of balance, a sense of alignment within your self-awareness that then affects your perspective on life itself. In a literal sense, is the God that we've always been searching for, is the God that we talked about forever. Is the God not something out there, but something rather within, as in the design of you before you that allows you to simply shift your awareness and allow your entire experience to change as a result? How can you do that? Did you invent that ability about your body? This God thing. The design that we are simply seeking out all the time to get closer and closer to the ability to be able to wash away each old moment by pretending there's a candle in front of our lips. By getting closer and closer to a design that allows us to align our awareness in such a way. By searching that design, is that not what this search for God has always been about? So what we might see in the outside world right now, what we might see in the world right now matches up with a worldview. What you might see in the world right now might seem to match a stencil of what happens when we come to the consensus that there's no God. When it becomes the popular idea that there is no God, it seems to match a particular view. It seems to match a particular stencil, a particular pattern. As in, we feel dejected by a God, when we feel dejected from our design, as in we forget that the back 1/3 of our tongue is vertical. And so our body feels the way that it does when it imagines that is anything but the design. In our lives, when society has placed into our minds the misconception that the tip of our tongue should not be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, we feel rejected from this design. As we stray further and further from the design, further and further from the ability to feel so good from the inside out, by simply putting our awareness onto the design, the truthful design. When we are confused out of believing that our tongue does not want, when we are confused out of believing that our tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, and we instead think that the tip of the tongue wants to do anything else, the literal physical feelings of every breath, of every moment, because we die every 5 minutes and that moment is reset with a breath, right? The timers are set with a breath. For every misconception, for every time that we are not aware of this design, that the tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, we are then rejected from all of the positive benefits that come from being closer to this design. Breathing well, moving well, recovering well, balancing well, experiencing moments of authenticity well. And don't we feel rejected from life? Don't we feel rejected from the design when we cannot align with this design? What we see in the world right now, it matches a pattern of what happens if you cannot feel this God thing that's supposed to be everywhere around, right? It's supposed to be everywhere around. For the last 20, 30, 45, 50 years, we've been seeing so much talk about in the world, God this, God that. But if you cannot feel this God thing, this design, the benefits of it, then you will not believe it. And so if there's no God thing out there, then what else is there? There's just me. If I cannot pretend that there's a candle in front of everybody's lips, and the fact that everybody's tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom fronts of teeth, as we are leaving our swallowing muscles alone and observing our sense of self, everybody is. If we are not able to feel the benefits of this so-called design, the you before you, if we are not able to feel those benefits because we're not aware of them, well, if there is no God, then there's all that there is just me. If I have no access to this God thing because I'm not able to make my body feel that way, because we all know that feelings come first, the body feelings comes first, then there is no God. And if there's no God, then there's just me. And if it's just me, well, I have this one life to live. It better be high octane. I better put my entire life out there. And since there is no you, or there's no me before me, there's just me, there's no God, right? Then everything that I can see defines all that I am, because there is no me that is a design that can go further than what I see right here and now. I have no proof of that, because there is no design, there is no sense of self. There's no sense of self before the self that will work for the self beyond what I can do right now. There's no idea of that. So everything that I see, this output from my body physically, whether it be emotions, whether it be what I'm wearing, whether it be the way I speak, everything that comes from me must be the most high octane, the most over the top. It must be life-changing. Why? Because this is the only life I have, and there's nothing else in control but me. There's nothing else here but me. There is no God thing but me. So any representation of me is a direct representation of all that I am, because there's no idea of anything I could be, just all that I have already done in a materialistic view, right? If there's no design, then there's no idea of what you could be, only what you've already done or are doing right now. So everything in life before I die, because I have one life to live, has to be the most high octane, has to be the most bestest ever in every way, because it must have the most energy, I've ever put into anything. It must have my 1000% into everything that I do outwardly, materialistically, so that people can see it, so that I can see it, because there's no self before the self. There's no design. So I am all that I see about myself. I'm all that I put out. So everything's got to be more, 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 more. Because if it's not, then I am worth nothing. As the world passes me by, I am worth nothing. And I'm not gonna let the world remind me that I'm worth nothing, because I have one life to live. There's nothing but me out here. So I'm going to remind myself and the world every day how much I'm worth, 1000%. I'm going to use all of my energy on proving that point. Because I am all there is. Everything I've done, everything I'm doing right now, everything you can see is all there is. And so what kind of a human being would I be if I was not giving my 1000% all into showing outwardly that to the world my greatness, everything that I am? Well, how bad of a person would I be if I saw this greatness within me and I didn't want to share it with the world? But if there's no idea, this design, this you before you, this self before the self, this design, then I have no trust that eventually people will see the greatness. They must see it now. They must see what I've done now. They must see what I notice about myself now, because there is no design in which to trust. It's just me. It's just me. But if it was just you, would pretending there's a candle in front of everybody's lips in the world affect you the way that it does? Would you not be able to remember that anchoring the tip of the tongue for everybody in the world to the back of the bottom front teeth might affect their experience? And did you make that? As you were leaving your swallowing muscles alone and observing your sense of self and shifting your awareness of the world from a visual awareness, a flat visual awareness, to a 3D alignment awareness of the world by becoming aware of every human individual, including yourself, in this simulation that we're playing, right? We're holding, everybody is holding their controller by placing into their mind's eye, into their awareness, that there is a candle, a flickering candle in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. As they breathe normally, they're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling, but we're all just having a flickering candle in front of the lips that they're trying to not put out. As we are remembering that every human's tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, as they are leaving their swallowing muscles alone and observing their sense of self. The you before you. Did you invent this ability for your body to change your awareness and be able to observe as your sense of self shifts, your sense of awareness shifts, your self-consciousness shifts, transforms, as we are pretending there's a candle in front of our lips that we're trying to not put out? And as we are anchoring the tip of the tongue to the back of the bottom front teeth, remembering that the back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical, up and down, remember? And leave the swallowing muscles alone as we are moving our self-awareness wherever you are, whenever thou art. Whether you are skating right now at the pier, whether you are rollerblading, whether you are studying for a test, whether you are eating some cheese crackers. I hope you're able today to place into your awareness the candles in front of every human's lips that they're trying to not put out. Remember that the back 1/3 of your tongue is vertical, as you are remembering that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. We want to believe so badly that it's just us. But as we shift our self-awareness like a muscle and allow ourselves to observe our sense of self, did we invent that ability for our body to do that? Or was it this design that came right before you, always before you? And isn't that always the God thing we've always been looking for in the beginning? I want to thank you so much for coming through today. I want to thank you so much for engaging and sticking with this. We'll see you tomorrow on the Truth Hurts Days on September 16th, 2021. Today has been September 15th, Warfare Wednesday, 2021. Talked about how there was no God right now. What we see, what the world looks like when there's no God. Are we talking about some God in the sky shooting lightning bolts, holding a cross above you and watching every move? Or rather, are we talking about the sense of self? Are we talking about the you before you, the design of the humans before you, the you before you that defines even your feelings about having a God or feelings about the other people thinking that there's a God, this you before you? Are we talking about some crazy floating God in the sky when we say there's, when we talk about God? Are we talking about something from within? This you before you. And does that not match a pattern in the world that we are seeing right now in what it looks like when people project their idea of a God, of what they think the world is talking about a God? Aren't we seeing what it looks like in a world where people feel dejected or feel like this idea of what they thought was a God has abandoned them? What do we turn towards? The self, because that's all there is. But we turn to the self today with an inability to actually look at the self. So if you would please pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that you're trying to not put out. As we acknowledge this self before the self and communicate with its ability to be able to actually feel the self for the self, if you would please remind yourself, I challenge you today to remind yourself that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. That the muscles in your body, I challenge you today to remind yourself that the muscles in your body that engage when you want to get a full and proper breath that releases you, engage when we pretend that there's a candle in front of the lips that we're trying to not put out. As we are leaving our swallowing muscles alone. And one more time, please, if you would, just say it with me. Even if it's in your head, that's okay. Please say it with me. The tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. Please remember that the weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front, and we'll see you guys here tomorrow. You window to this godlike experience that you are. Thank you for coming to. Special shout out, Monsieur Eric. Good morning. This is your host, Eric. Or Herbie. This has been another episode of Pal Go On. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Please pretend about that candle that you're trying not to put out. Always view yourself in this 3D awareness. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Stretching our self-awareness like a muscle every morning. We'll see you tomorrow.